just really important to know, and for our listeners, that these dysregulated behaviors, there's so many reasons for it. And rather than, which you do as a parent, because I get it, I'm a parent too, is you get frustrated. And part of the frustration is you don't know why it's happening and what to do about it.
Mm.
But it is a sign, and we need to kind of step back. And one of the things you said, which I was really glad you brought up, is we as parents have our own agenda.
Yeah.
Right? We have our own agenda. We're going to do this, then we're going to do that, then we're going to do this, and we're going to go there. As an adult, you can make and decide if you're going to change your plans. Oh, God, I'm tired. You know what? I'm not going to do the laundry today. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I don't feel like dealing with it. I don't want to go to the store today. I know I needed to go to the card store and get birthday cards. I'm just going to go tomorrow. I'm just beat. Or I'm frustrated. I had a tough day at work. But when you're a child or a teen, and your parent kind of is like, I don't want to say word dictating, but kind of like, that's the plan. We're going to go here. We're going to do this. Then we're going to go get there. We're going to get shoes. We're going to get our hair cut. We're going to do this. As a child, you're going to react behaviorally, right? And so sometimes we have to say, hey, maybe my child's too tired today to work on her goals or games. Like, what's going on? And then if they're old enough, you can say, hey, you seem a little tired. Maybe we do it after dinner, or you know what, we do it twice tomorrow. You have to have flexibility when you're working with anyone. When you have a child that has anxiety, just a child in general, you've got to be flexible, authoritative in parenting, not authoritarian. And we work with a lot of parents that go, wow, I didn't even think of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I was supposed to go to a cocktail party last Friday with my husband. I was just beat.
Yeah.
But I just said, go without me. I'm tired. Well, with our kids, we're taking them to the store. We're going here. We're going there. And sometimes I just want our listeners to say, hey, this makes sense. Maybe this is, like you said, coming home from school, sitting in school all day, being kind of pent up. Maybe they need time to run around. Maybe they need a snack. Maybe they didn't eat well in school. Maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe they're having a sugar low. So I think it's really, important with that, flexibility. When you see a child being very controlling, wanting things to be a certain way, resisting transitions, again, that's a challenging behavior. And often all of these things that we're talking about, controlling behaviors, emotional dysregulation, shutting down, avoidance, they're signs of discomfort. They're telling us something.
Yeah.
And we talked about the whys. We talked about the social communication anxiety, not knowing what, when, and where, which is such a big thing. And this is why so much of what we do with our CBT based SCAT is viewing the whole person and helping them know what, when, and where through our action plans, sandwich questions, the hi bye game, the common questions, the guess who, the interviews, the I am and I just statements. There's so many games and goals that we work on to help the kids know what, when, and where, and to be ready for conversations and to respect their stages on the bridge. You mentioned a lot about the whys with sensory issues, noise, visual overwhelm, crowded spaces, physical. We didn't talk a lot about like clothes and, I'm thinking about my little granddaughter. Yes, everyone, I'm a grandma, but I remember for her naming, she was wearing a dress that was just not comfortable and it was itchy and she just was like irritable and we weren't used to her being that way. Well, she couldn't say this dress is itching me. So she reacted behaviorally. She cried. And that was so unlike her to be crying like the way she was. And as soon as we realized, whoa, she's just uncomfortable in that dress, we changed her. She was as happy as can be. Now, of course, she wore a onesie to her baby naming because we didn't have another dress. And you remember this, but little Ellie was just really irritable from the dress. But many of our sensory kids don't do well with clothes tags, hair brushing.
Yeah.
Again, they're not being difficult. They're reacting to a feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're reacting to a feeling. And we talked about emotional dysregulation and how this internal anxiety could spill over. They may appear calm and then suddenly melt down. Difficulty labeling and expressing feelings. I mean, you want to talk about that? Because, like you said, a lot of our kids, even our older kids, our teens, a big part of what we do is we help them understand feelings. It's such a big part of what we do, and rate and grade their feelings and respect what they feel.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that like again, there's a variety of reasons for why maybe emotions are really hard to identify. So that's again where like those contributing factors are really important to understand into the maintenance, because there's certain individuals, for example, like there's some individuals on the spectrum where just labeling emotions can feel really, really challenging, right? And so being aware of like, well, what is causing maybe some of these challenges. But what I would also say is, sometimes even like our speech and language like challenge children or teens and young adults, like even that expression piece of so open ended can feel really overwhelming, right? Because they might have an expressive language challenge. So there's so many variety of reasons, but we use, many different types of interventions. One of the interventions that we use is something called a feelings chart, which I feel like we've talked about in here before. But for younger kids, we rate it from like a 0 to 3, older kids at 0 to 5, but it's the same thing. It's just more about, having more complexity with your feelings as you get older. So 0 to 3 for younger kids being like 3 being the most scary, right? 0 to 5, 5 being the most anxiety provoking, the most difficult. And as the numbers go down into a 0, it's like most comfortable. Or for a younger child, I always say it's like super happy, right? Super comfortable. So many times we just start with that. We try to label our feelings. Like, how did it feel when we came into the session today? Did that feel for a younger child super scary, like medium happy, or super happy, right? For an older teen, like, let's talk about it. Like, what did that feel like? Did it feel like a 5, which was like super, super uncomfortable, really anxiety provoking? Was it more like a 4, which is like a little bit less than a 5, but it's still pretty anxiety provoking? 3 is kind of like in the middle, right? 2 is like a little bit less. 1's obviously a little bit less. And then 0 is like where we feel really, really comfortable. And so we'll really identify like each aspect. So for some teens, like I will literally differentiate between like, what does a 1 feel like comparatively to a 2, comparatively to a 3? And like, we'll talk about all of those different things. And what's interesting is some individuals have challenges where things are either a 3 or they're a 0. And there's a lot of the in between that's really
Yeah.
hard to differentiate. So that's where a lot of times psychoeducation can come in. Like I just had a child I worked with yesterday, and she does really well with her feelings chart. She's 6, but she kept saying everything was a 3 or a 0. And I said, well, so when we started doing sounds in the session, because that was a really great strategy for her. We do sounds into words, and so she was starting to make some sounds, and she had rated that a 0. And I was like, well, I did notice that we did it. So I agree. It definitely did not feel like maybe a 2 or a 3, but I'm wondering, did it feel like super, super comfortable? Or do you think that like it was a little bit harder than when you were giving me some thumbs up, just because we were starting to kind of make some sounds? And so she was able to identify it was like a 1 for her. So sometimes it's kind of us, either as the educators or you as parents, kind of like helping them. Now, we're not forcing like, I'm not saying to her it has to be a 1. I'm still giving her the autonomy, but I'm trying to like help her differentiate sometimes like when things can feel a little scarier versus not. But I would say the feelings chart, and we talk about this all the time, it's a huge way when especially
Oh,
individuals have difficulty labeling their feelings, to really start that process.
so a couple things. You said so much great information there. I have worked with a lot of parents over time where you'll hear the parent in session correct the child on what they feel. Well, that shouldn't feel scary. Like,
Hmm.
you know her, you've known her all your life. That shouldn't feel scary. Or why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you just asking the store clerk this question? That shouldn't be hard. And so without realizing, they're dismissing the child's feelings.
Yeah.
And what we've learned as we go through treatment with families, because so much of our work, which is why we do all day parent education and support and work through scenarios and role play and coach at Communicamp for 15 hours, is because you as a parent are the most critical component to the success of your child. Your children don't come with a guidebook everywhere they go saying, do this, do this, do this. You are the facilitator. So we have to work with you. We have to train you. We have to help you. We have to support you. It's such an important concept that so many parents are like, well, I just need you to work with my child. Ain't going to work. We work with your child, but we learn and then we train you how to facilitate, how to help your child. And what we have learned through treatment, because I see the evolution as I work with a family, and it doesn't take long. You see the child open up more to their own parent when they feel safe and to be able to express their feelings without worry of dismissal or
Hmm.
without worry of invalidating them, because it's so important. Our kids don't feel comfortable in situations. You can't fight them on it.
Yeah.
And children need that ability to reflect, and feelings journals There's so many, even like on Etsy, writing their feelings, being able to get in tune to what they feel, to be able to rate and grade. And because kids can't express themselves as well, and there's lots of ways: music therapy, art therapy, equine therapy, all of these things are wonderful adjuncts to a treatment program, but they're not the cure all and end all to be able to just support a child all the way through their social communication anxiety. They need the skills, they need the strategies, the interventions, but they're wonderful adjuncts that I can't say enough of to work with our kids to help them identify the feelings and lower their anxiety and give them confidence and strength and courage. It's amazing how these adjunctive therapies, and that would be a wonderful podcast
Mhm.
topic too. But as they're working through this, using numerical values, as you said, 0 to 3, 0 to 5, some kids will go 4.5 or 4.35, and they get really into the nitty gritty of their feelings. It gives them a way through the numerical value to label a feeling rather than explain a feeling.
Yeah.
It's very universal that explaining why something happens, why I feel that way, is hard. But if they can relate to a number, then it helps them relate to
Yeah.
what they're going through. So we often, as you said, 0 or 3, we will say, well, wait, a 3 is when, or a 5 is when you're really shut down. Like you said that when Uncle Bill and Aunt Sally were coming over, you felt so scared, and that was like 100, right? It felt like 100. So you're now able to be able to high five Uncle Bill. What does that feel like, 100, or is that feeling like, you know, maybe a little lower? So you got to give them words for their feelings. Sometimes you correct them. So if
Yeah.
they say it's really easy, but it's not, you could say, well, really easy is when you're home with mom and dad and the words are coming out really easy. When you're at a restaurant, maybe it's a 1 or 2. And one of the things that I love in session is they redo feelings charts all the time.
Yeah.
And they start to see that their comfort has increased,
Yeah.
and they're feeling better about some of the games and goals they're doing, and they went, wow, when I first started it felt like this, now it's feeling like much lower, and that's a confidence booster.
Yeah, and I will say too, kind of like as a wrap up, because I feel like this is kind of a good summary to kind of like finish up a lot of the things that we're talking about, is believe it or not, the feelings chart can actually be an incredible way to minimize some of the emotion regulation challenges. Because sometimes, when I do feelings charts with individuals, you don't realize how much the avoidance or the shutdown, right? Or, some of the, emotion reactions or the controlling behaviors stem from the fact that they don't have words for their feelings. And so that's where the feelings chart can come in. And believe it or not, sometimes I'll have individuals rate how they're feeling before they do an exposure and after. And some of the avoidance could stem from the fact that they're not rating their feelings before they do something. So I was just working with a young adult the other day, and she comes in every time. She always tells me like how she felt when she does an exposure. And then I had a moment where I looked at her and I was like, well, wait a minute. We've talked about this before, because we were trying to add a new exposure and she was a little bit resistant. And I said to her, I was like, how do we feel sometimes like thinking about this before? And she didn't know. And I said, I was like, I'm wondering, are we unsure how we're going to feel because we've never really rated feelings before? Like we only rate feelings after. And she said, yes. And I was like, well, let's add that in. Like, let's rate our feelings before and after, because one, I wanted her to start seeing that there's something called anticipation anxiety. And so many times our anxiety is a lot higher before we do something than afterwards. And then also that could end up actually reducing shutdown and avoidance, because the more that we do things and we realize, wait a minute, that wasn't so bad, the easier it is for us to not avoid and to actually go forward and kind of engage in a new scenario. So feelings charts can be very effective in just identifying how we're feeling, but it can also be really effective in helping us navigate, some of these goals and interventions as well.